I would go so far as to say that this is the wedding of the decade, not just of the year.
This is probably going to be the biggest wedding in Australian wedding history.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch and to the most hyped media wedding you'll ever see, in which FM shock jock Kyle Sandilands and his former PA, Tegan Kynaston, tied the knot in Sydney on Saturday with some of Australia's most powerful people in entertainment and politics cheering them on. And all previewed on the front of Friday's Daily Telly.
Underbelly and Almighty unite for King Kyle's wedding.
So, who was at the bash? Well, the Prime Minister, for one. Plus, the newly elected New South Wales Premier Chris Minns, whom Kyle endorsed for office. Nine's Carl Stefanovic was also in the scrum. And from the other end of town was the last King of the Cross, Teflon John Ibrahim, Sandilands' closest friend and groomsman. While best man was convicted drug trafficker Simon Mayne, once a pimp who ferried prostitutes around Sydney in a limo, dubbed the Booty Bentley. The company you keep, eh? And in the lead-up to the big day, the Daily Mail couldn't hide its excitement, getting a big wedding list scoop on Thursday and pumping out more than 40 stories in 5 days. From the bride-to-be's last-minute manicure, the huge blow that it would rain on the big day, and confirmation the couple had sex on the wedding night. Really? And Seven's entertainment reporter Peter Ford was also prepping the audience by teasing the outlandish cost.
But I'm told already he's actually spent more than $1 million on the event, and the wedding cake itself is just shy of $10,000.
But when you top the ratings and earn a reported $5 million a year, I guess you can have as much cake as you want. And as many politicians. Even if your show has copped complaints for countless grubby moments like this.
Now, the monkeypox, the big gay disease floating around, it's only the gays getting it. Are you worried about getting that?
No,
Why
not at all.
Have you seen the dirty scabs that everyone gets?
Sandilands did not apologise for that, but he did say sorry after a fashion for a rant about his colleagues in which he called them spazzes. And his foul mouth has seen him in trouble with the media watchdog too many times. In 2020, the Australian Communications and Media Authority, ACMA, pinged him for calling people of faith dumb as dog shit and saying of the Virgin Mary...
I thought Mary was his girlfriend, but apparently it was the mother.
Yeah.
And the mother lied, obviously, and told everyone, no, I got pregnant by a magical ghost. Bullshit. Someone chock-a-blocked her behind the camel shed.
And more recently, ACMA found King Kyle had breached decency standards for making insensitive comments like this about Paralympians.
Have you been watching the Special Olympics? They're terrific, some of the things. When they were playing soccer, the blind people, I was thinking, are you joking? They're throwing themselves on the ground like sausages to block the ball.
Nothing that the media watchdog has done so far has been able to stem the flow of vile and offensive trash that Sandilands often puts to air. And you have to wonder why people like the Prime Minister and the New South Wales Premier think it's appropriate to rub shoulders with him and his underbelly mates. When asked on Friday about the wedding, the Prime Minister palmed it off, saying he wasn't in charge of the guest list and describing Sandilands as...
a bloke who at one stage was homeless, living on the streets of Sydney, and has grown into someone who is a significant public figure.
So much for our leaders standing up for decency standards in the media. But such is the perceived power of King Kyle and his huge audience, Albo and Minns clearly felt the need to kiss his crown. And now, while we're talking of the media watchdog and its difficulty dealing with serial offenders, let's check in with Sky's Outsiders, which was last week found by ACMA to have...
breached its responsibilities to present news accurately and fairly, and to distinguish clearly between factual material and commentary, on 4 separate occasions between October and December 2021.
Like Kyle, the host of Outsiders, Rowan Dean, has starred on Media Watch many times, mostly for his crazy climate denial.
Every week I do a segment called Ice Age Watch, where we look at what we think is happening with the weather around the planet.
Ice Age Watch is so ridiculous, it's hard to take it seriously. But ACMA clearly has, and good on them. We whacked Dean in 2019 for an absurd interview with a self-styled astro-meteorologist who claimed the stars can tell you how much it will rain or shine 1,000 years from now.
You can predict, 1,000 years in advance using astronomy.
And who was this David Burton? Turned out he was a corporate astrologer who used astrology to make predictions on financial investments, hedging currency, futures and trading markets, and who claimed he could use Hindu astrology to accurately predict the outcomes of horse races. So why did outsiders treat him as an expert? Good question, especially since his claims were dismissed by a real astronomer, Professor Michael Brown from Monash, as...
obviously bunkum, complete nonsense.
But that wasn't the first time that outsiders' stupid score had gone off the dial. Here is Dean and his then co-host Ross Cameron in 2017, pouring scorn on climate scientists' warnings that global warming will cause sea levels to rise.
It's gone up by about a millimetre.
Rising sea levels.
You got it? I've got it. 3 mil.
3 mil.
Media Watch had a crack at that one too, and at this segment in 2018 in which Dean suggested the world isn't warming.
This week, news of the big chill has come as a big shock to global warming activists across the globe.
And we did Dean again in 2020 for downplaying the link between climate change and the nation's worst ever bushfires.
Unprecedented bushfires, unprecedented drought. No, this Australian summer has been the summer of unprecedented stupidity.
Those are just a sample, and we suggested someone should complain to the media watchdog. Well, now that's happened, and ACMA has given outsiders a big slapdown after former PM and Murdoch media scourge Kevin Rudd made 80 complaints about the programme back in 2021. ACMA looked at 6 of Rudd's complaints relating to 4 of the broadcasts and found outsiders had breached industry codes 4 times by failing to present news accurately and fairly, and/or by failing to distinguish fact from opinion. And here is one example. A claim that the UK was forcing people to scrap their gas heaters at great expense. And apologies for the quality of the video.
Bonkers Boris Johnson, who is mandating that everyone in Britain get rid of their perfectly good gas heaters and replace them with desperately inefficient eco heat pumps at around £10,000 to £20,000 a pop.
ACMA found that claim to be flat out wrong. The UK policy doesn't take effect till 2035, and even then, no one will be forced to scrap their heater. And this claim that coral on the Great Barrier Reef was in terrific health, ACMA found to be misleading. Here is the audio of that segment.
The coral reefs are looking fantastic.
Fabulous.
They've done a report, the Australian Maritime Institute done a report, they've come out and said there's never been so much coral.
That was misleading, said ACMA, because of what outsiders left out. While the reef was in better shape than some had claimed, said ACMA.
The report nevertheless found that the recovery was fragile and at risk, and that the longer-term prognosis was uncertain.
And did Rowan tell viewers that? No. According to ACMA,
none of this important context was provided.
So viewers were left with the clear impression the reef was not at risk. Now, if you add the 4 ACMA code breaches to the nonsense Media Watch has exposed, you would expect some consequences. After all, as another former PM and Murdoch critic, Malcolm Turnbull, told Crikey last week,
the Murdoch media, from Fox in the US to Sky in Australia, have been systematically spreading lies and disinformation, with terrible consequences for our democracies and, in this case, the climate. At long last, they are being held to account.
But don't get excited, because the watchdog's bite is barely a nibble. All Foxtel has to do, and it is responsible for outsiders, is to review its processes to ensure that Sky News will comply with the code in future, and to report back to ACMA within 4 months. And are the folks at Sky embarrassed? Clearly not, dismissing the guilty verdict with a statement to say,
the complaints were made by Mr Rudd as part of a politically motivated campaign against Sky News Australia. We estimate these actions have consumed some hundreds of hours of the regulator's time and resources, also paid for by the taxpayer.
And Sky host Andrew Bolt was even more damning.
Seriously? Really? What a chilling effect this has had on free speech in this country. Is that really what ACMA is for?
So, can we expect Rowan Dean and co to be so chilled that they stop spouting nonsense about climate change and have regard for the facts? I doubt it, but Dean did at least refrain from aping Bolt and rubbishing the verdict, telling viewers,
also, like any good sport, I accept the verdict of the umpire, even if I don't necessarily agree with it. Obviously, I only ever present material that I believe to be truthful, and I always attempt to do so accurately.
And that includes Rowan's alternative facts. But now to Russia, and a fate no journalist should ever have to face.
US journalist Evan Gershkovich kept in a cage during a brief appearance in a Moscow court. He had hoped to be released on pre-trial bail, but a judge rejected his application. The 31-year-old will stay behind bars for at least another month.
Arrested just over a month ago, the Wall Street Journal's Evan Gershkovich is the son of Russian Jews who fled the Soviet Union, and is the first American journalist to be charged with espionage in Russia since the Cold War. He stands accused of
trying to obtain classified information about a Russian arms factory.
And the Kremlin has wasted no time in pronouncing him guilty.
Within hours of the arrest, Dmitry Peskov, the spokesperson for the President Vladimir Putin, claimed Gershkovich had been caught red-handed.
Caught red-handed with what? We don't know. No evidence has been produced against Gershkovich, who filed these stories in the days before his arrest. And the Wall Street Journal vehemently denies the allegations. More than 30 editors across Europe and the US have also signed an open letter to Russia's ambassador in Washington calling for the reporter's immediate release, stating,
Gershkovich is a journalist, not a spy. He lived in Moscow for several years, is accredited with the Russian Foreign Ministry and has been covering Russia as part of the journal's Moscow bureau.
But it's hard to see the Kremlin caring about his credentials, given its crackdown on journalism, with the letter from the Committee to Protect Journalists going on to say,
Gershkovich's unwarranted and unjust arrest is a significant escalation in your government's anti-press actions.
And it's true. The media crackdown has been both vicious and effective. In the weeks following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Putin all but crushed the country's independent media. And 6 weeks ago, the country's already draconian laws were tightened further with a new penalty of up to 5 years in jail for discrediting the war, which the International Press Institute has described as
the latest step in Russia's efforts to build a parallel reality inside the country by silencing independent reporting on the truth of Russia's war on Ukraine.
So, what's the chance of Gershkovich getting a fair trial? 2 weeks ago, his lawyer was putting a positive spin on the situation.
He is in a fighting spirit. He is ready to prove the right to free journalism. He is ready to defend himself.
But justice is elusive in Russia. As the BBC's Steve Rosenberg reported from Moscow last week,
in Russian courts, only 1 in every 300 verdicts is not guilty. So last year there were 614,700 convictions and just 2,062 acquittals.
Shocking numbers. But let's hope that, with support from his president, speaking at the annual White House Correspondents' dinner, Gershkovich's case won't ever go to trial.
Journalism is not a crime. Evan and Austin should be released immediately, along with every other American held hostage or wrongfully detained abroad.
Gershkovich is due back in court at the end of the month. And finally, to the other end of the scale and the thrilling life of a commercial TV reporter.
He arrived a man of the people. But this was no ordinary man. His true identity a secret. He is the hero of hommus, who was about to be knighted. Why do you love hommus?
It is the most refreshing and nourishing of all condiments across the land.
Yes, believe it or not, that was a Channel 9 news story, filmed in Melbourne and snapped up by bulletins in Adelaide and Brisbane. And what was the news? It was that this guy, who's wisely staying anonymous in case he's hauled up for bad acting, bet he could eat his body mass in a well-known chickpea dip, then made a suit of armour from the tubs and filmed a video of himself marching down the street and into a supermarket, which he sent to the dip manufacturer. Cue Channel 9 to come running to the celebration and Alan Rascal to ask questions like this.
How much did you eat?
37 tubs.
37 tubs. How big are the tubs?
This well-planned pantomime was filmed at the dip maker's depot, with the dip maker's employees making up a guard of honour.
It was then time for the hommus queen to do her duty and bestow the knighthood.
And starring as the hummus queen was none other than the company's marketing director. Now, You have to hand it to Yumis, you will have read the name several times by now, for creating a brilliant ad and for getting 9 News to play along.
And there's that old saying, if you can't beat 'em, join 'em. We've got Knight Hommus, Queen Hommus, time for King Hommus.
But why on earth would 9 make fools of themselves and put it on the news? We asked 9, but they declined to comment. We asked Yumis if the hummus night was dreamed up by the company as a marketing stunt. They said no. He came to them out of the blue and no payment was made either to him or to 9. That's all from us for tonight. Don't forget Media Bites on Facebook, YouTube and Instagram. But for now, until next week, goodbye.